Command calculated the acceptable losses: 1 ammunition depot versus 3,000 civilian casualties. The numbers made sense on paper. But Corporal Zhang wasn't looking at paperwork, he was looking at a village full of children, families, and innocent people who deserved someone willing to risk everything to save them. The damaged explosives were leaking chemical compounds, creating a 72-hour countdown to detonation that would vaporize everything within 2 miles. Zhang had 500 kilograms of unstable ammunition and 30 miles of Afghan mountain terrain between those innocent lives and safety. One wrong step would end everything. At Forward Operating Base Kashmir in eastern Afghanistan, the ammunition storage facility operated with military precision that reflected years of experience handling explosive materials in combat zones. Corporal David Zhang supervised daily operations with expertise gained through 3 years of explosive ordnance disposal training and 2 previous deployments handling munitions logistics in hostile environments. Zhang's background included specialized training in chemical explosives, detonation systems, and safety protocols that governed the storage, transportation, and disposal of military ordnance. His expertise had been developed through extensive coursework at the Army's Explosive Ordnance Disposal School, where he had graduated with honors after demonstrating exceptional aptitude for working with dangerous materials under pressure. The ammunition depot contained massive quantities of explosive materials essential for ongoing combat operations throughout the region. Artillery shells for long-range fire support missions, mortar rounds for infantry operations, anti-tank missiles for armored vehicle engagement, and thousands of rounds of small arms ammunition that sustained daily combat activities across multiple forward operating bases. Zhang's team of 6 specialists managed inventory, conducted safety inspections, and prepared munitions for distribution to combat units according to strict protocols that prioritized both operational effectiveness and personnel safety. Each team member possessed advanced training in explosive handling, with collective experience that represented decades of professional expertise in military ordnance operations. The depot's security systems included reinforced concrete bunkers designed to contain accidental explosions, sophisticated fire suppression equipment that could respond to various types of chemical fires, and monitoring systems that tracked temperature, humidity, and chemical signatures that could indicate dangerous conditions developing within stored munitions. On Tuesday morning at 0830 hours, Zhang was conducting routine inventory procedures when alarms throughout the facility began sounding with intensity that indicated critical system failures requiring immediate emergency response. Multiple warning lights activated simultaneously, suggesting cascading problems that exceeded normal operational parameters. Zhang quickly identified the source of alarm activation, Temperature Bunker 7, which contained recently delivered ammunition that had shown unusual chemical signatures during previous inspections. The bunker's cooling systems had failed during the night, allowing internal temperatures to rise beyond safe storage limits for certain types of explosive materials. Chemical analysis equipment revealed dangerous decomposition occurring within specific munition types, creating volatile compounds that were highly sensitive to shock, vibration, and continued temperature elevation. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, with computer projections indicating massive detonation within 72 hours if corrective action wasn't implemented immediately. At 0847 hours, a catastrophic explosion destroyed Temperature Bunker 7 with devastating force that killed Zhang's entire team instantly and left him as the sole survivor of the ammunition depot facility. The blast shattered concrete walls, twisted metal support structures, and scattered debris across a quarter-mile radius while creating a mushroom cloud visible throughout the region. Zhang was thrown 50 feet by the explosion's concussive force, sustaining multiple injuries including a severe concussion, lacerations across his face and arms, and potential internal injuries that would require medical attention unavailable during field operations. However, his injuries weren't immediately life-threatening, allowing him to maintain consciousness and assess the catastrophic situation developing around him. The explosion had damaged the remaining ammunition bunkers in ways that created an unprecedented crisis. 500 kilograms of mixed explosive materials had been scattered across the facility grounds, with chemical decomposition accelerating due to exposure to extreme heat, damaged containment systems, and volatile mixing of different explosive compounds that weren't designed for interaction. Zhang's training immediately recognized the danger indicators: unstable chemical signatures, visible decomposition products, and irregular heating patterns that suggested massive secondary explosion would occur within 72 hours. The projected blast radius would extend 2 miles in every direction, encompassing the Afghan village of Garib, where 3,000 civilian residents lived their daily lives unaware of the approaching catastrophe. Emergency protocols required immediate evacuation of all personnel, followed by controlled detonation that would eliminate the explosive hazard while accepting the destruction of the civilian village as unavoidable collateral damage. Command transmitted evacuation orders within minutes of the explosion: all personnel evacuate immediately. Establish 2-mile perimeter. Prepare for controlled detonation in 60 minutes. Zhang looked toward Garib village, where children played in streets, families conducted daily business, and innocent people trusted that American military forces would protect them from harm rather than cause their destruction. The village represented everything he had joined the military to protect: innocent lives, peaceful communities, and the belief that soldiers existed to serve others rather than sacrifice them for tactical convenience. Command's evacuation order was clear, tactically sound, and perfectly reasonable according to every military protocol that governed explosive hazard management. Controlled detonation would eliminate the threat to American forces while accepting civilian casualties as an unfortunate but unavoidable consequence of combat operations in populated areas. Zhang's radio crackled with increasingly urgent evacuation commands as base personnel prepared for immediate departure. Zhang, acknowledge evacuation orders immediately. You have 15 minutes to clear the danger zone before we implement controlled detonation. But Zhang couldn't abandon 3,000 innocent people to certain death when an alternative existed, even if that alternative violated every safety protocol and regulation he had ever learned. The damaged explosives could be transported away from the civilian area if someone was willing to accept the enormous risk of carrying unstable materials through mountain terrain where any shock or vibration could trigger instant vaporization. Zhang's explosive ordnance disposal training included theoretical knowledge about moving damaged munitions, though such operations were considered extremely hazardous and were normally conducted using specialized equipment, multiple personnel, and extensive safety measures that weren't available during emergency field conditions. The transport distance to a safe detonation area measured 30 miles through Afghan mountain terrain that included rocky paths, steep inclines, river crossings, and potential enemy activity that could interfere with movement or create additional shock risks that would trigger explosive detonation during transport operations. Zhang calculated the mathematical probability of successfully transporting 500 kilograms of unstable explosives 30 miles through mountain terrain without triggering detonation. Every military assessment suggested the mission was essentially suicidal, with less than 5% probability of survival even under optimal conditions with perfect weather and no enemy interference. Zhang made his decision by thinking about the children in Garib village who reminded him of his younger sister back home in California. Lu had always looked up to her big brother who wore an American uniform and served others, believing that soldiers existed to protect innocent people rather than allow their destruction for tactical convenience. Command, this is Zhang. I'm implementing alternative disposal procedures. Do not proceed with controlled detonation. I'm moving the explosive materials to safe disposal area. Zhang, you are ordered to evacuate immediately. Moving unstable explosives through mountain terrain is tactically impossible and operationally suicidal. Acknowledge evacuation orders. Zhang turned off his radio, picked up the first container of damaged ammunition, and began the most dangerous journey of his life. Zhang assembled improvised transportation equipment using materials salvaged from the destroyed depot and nearby military supplies. A reinforced backpack designed for heavy equipment loads would distribute the weight of explosive materials across his shoulders and back. Shock-absorbing padding created from vehicle seat cushions would minimize vibration transfer during movement. Emergency medical supplies including morphine and antibiotics would treat injuries if he survived explosive accidents. Each container of damaged ammunition weighed approximately 50 kilograms, requiring 10 separate loads to transport all unstable materials to the safe disposal area 30 miles away through mountain terrain that would test every aspect of his physical endurance and mental determination. Zhang studied topographical maps that showed the safest route through Afghan mountains, identifying paths that minimized elevation changes, avoided rocky terrain that could create shock hazards, and stayed clear of known enemy activity areas where combat engagement could trigger accidental detonation of his explosive cargo. The route planning revealed significant challenges that would multiply the difficulty of his mission. Stream crossings required careful navigation to prevent slipping or falling that could jar explosive materials. Rocky slopes demanded precise foot placement to avoid stumbling or creating vibrations that could trigger detonation. Enemy patrol areas forced detours that would increase travel distance and time requirements. Zhang calculated that each round trip would require approximately 6 hours of careful movement, allowing completion of all 10 loads within 60 hours if weather conditions remained favorable and enemy activity didn't interfere with his transportation schedule. However, the 72-hour detonation timeline provided minimal margin for error, delays, or unforeseen complications. Weather forecasts indicated potential precipitation that would create muddy conditions, making mountain travel more dangerous, possible wind that could affect his balance while carrying heavy loads, and temperature fluctuations that might accelerate chemical decomposition in the explosive materials he was transporting. Zhang's physical preparation included consuming high-energy foods to fuel extended physical exertion, hydrating extensively to prevent dehydration during mountain climbing, and conducting stretching exercises to prepare muscles for carrying heavy loads across challenging terrain for extended periods. Zhang secured the first 50-kilogram load of unstable explosives to his reinforced backpack system, immediately feeling the enormous weight that would accompany him throughout 30 miles of treacherous mountain terrain. The explosive materials felt warm against his back, reminding him constantly that he was carrying enough destructive power to eliminate everything within a quarter-mile radius. The initial movement through base perimeter required extreme caution as Zhang navigated past vehicle traffic, construction equipment, and personnel activities that created vibrations and disturbances that could potentially trigger detonation of his explosive cargo. Every footstep had to be calculated and deliberate, avoiding sudden movements or impacts that could jar the sensitive materials. Military personnel throughout the base watched Zhang's departure with a mixture of admiration and disbelief as they realized what their fellow soldier was attempting to accomplish. Many offered assistance or alternative solutions, but Zhang understood that his mission required individual commitment that couldn't be shared without multiplying the risk to additional lives. The mountain trail beyond base perimeter immediately presented challenges that tested Zhang's preparation and determination. Loose rocks created unstable footing that required careful navigation to prevent falls that could detonate his cargo. Steep inclines demanded precise balance while carrying weight that threatened to overbalance his center of gravity and send him tumbling down mountainsides. Stream crossings proved particularly dangerous as water flow created slippery conditions where a single misstep could result in falling onto rocks while carrying explosives sensitive to any impact. Zhang developed crossing techniques that minimized shock transmission while maintaining forward progress toward the disposal area. After 6 hours of careful movement, Zhang reached the designated safe area and successfully deposited his first load without incident. The disposal area was located in a remote valley where explosive detonation would harm no civilians or military personnel, representing the only acceptable location for eliminating the unstable materials threatening Garib village. Zhang allowed himself 15 minutes of rest before beginning the return journey to collect his second load, understanding that time constraints required maximum efficiency while maintaining safety procedures that prevented accidental detonation during transport operations. The second load revealed the cumulative physical impact of Zhang's impossible mission as muscle fatigue, joint stress, and cardiovascular demands began affecting his movement capability and decision-making processes. The 50-kilogram weight felt heavier than during his first trip, and balance became increasingly difficult as his core muscles tired from hours of precise load carrying. Zhang's feet developed painful blisters inside his boots, creating discomfort that grew worse with each step while threatening to affect his balance and gait in ways that could increase shock transmission to his explosive cargo. His shoulders ached constantly from the backpack straps, and his neck muscles cramped from maintaining head position that would optimize balance during movement. The mountain terrain seemed more challenging during his second transit as familiarity revealed additional hazards that hadn't been apparent during initial passage. Weather conditions were deteriorating with increased wind that affected balance, temperature drops that made rock surfaces more slippery, and cloud cover that reduced visibility during critical navigation decisions. Zhang implemented rest procedures that allowed muscle recovery while maintaining progress toward his objective. Brief stops every hour provided opportunities to adjust his load, check explosive material condition, and assess his own physical capability for continued operations. However, rest periods consumed precious time from his 72-hour deadline while providing minimal recovery benefits. Communication with base operations remained impossible due to radio silence protocols required when transporting unstable explosives through areas where electronic signals might trigger accidental detonation. Zhang operated without backup support, medical assistance, or tactical guidance that could help him overcome obstacles encountered during his mission. By the completion of his second load delivery, Zhang understood that his physical capability was degrading faster than anticipated, threatening his ability to complete 10 round trips within the available timeframe. Muscle fatigue was accumulating exponentially, making each subsequent load progressively more difficult than previous trips. During his third load transport, Zhang encountered an Afghan patrol that presented tactical complications beyond the primary challenge of explosive transportation. 3 local fighters armed with AK-47 rifles were conducting routine surveillance operations along mountain trails that happened to intersect Zhang's transportation route. The encounter occurred in rocky terrain where sudden movements or defensive actions could create shock waves that would detonate Zhang's explosive cargo, killing everyone within a quarter-mile radius including the Afghan fighters who posed the tactical threat. Zhang had to navigate the confrontation without combat engagement while protecting unstable materials from any disturbance that could trigger catastrophic explosion. Zhang slowly removed his weapon while explaining his mission through limited Afghan language skills supplemented by hand gestures that demonstrated his peaceful intentions and the dangerous nature of his cargo. The fighters initially appeared suspicious and potentially hostile, but recognition of the explosive hazard transformed confrontation into cooperation. One of the fighters, an older man who apparently understood English, asked about Zhang's destination and purpose. When Zhang explained that he was removing explosives that would otherwise kill civilians in Garib village, the Afghans' attitude shifted from suspicion to respect and admiration for a foreign soldier willing to risk his life protecting local people. The fighters offered to provide escort assistance during Zhang's remaining trips, understanding that his mission protected their own community members and family relationships within Garib village. However, Zhang declined their assistance because additional personnel would multiply explosion casualties if accidental detonation occurred during transport operations. The encounter delayed Zhang's third load delivery by 2 hours while consuming emotional energy required for maintaining focus and physical precision during explosive transportation. However, it also provided psychological encouragement by demonstrating that his mission was recognized and appreciated by people whose lives he was trying to save. Zhang's fourth and fifth loads pushed his physical capabilities beyond sustainable limits as accumulated muscle damage, dehydration effects, and cardiovascular stress began threatening his ability to maintain the precise control required for safe explosive transportation. His hands trembled from exhaustion, making load handling more dangerous, while his legs shook from muscle fatigue that compromised balance and stability. Sleep deprivation compounded Zhang's physical problems as the urgency of his mission prevented adequate rest between transportation cycles. Microsleep episodes occurred during movement, creating dangerous moments where unconscious walking could result in falls or impacts that would trigger explosive detonation. Zhang implemented stimulation techniques including caffeine consumption and physical pain that would maintain alertness during critical operations. Nutritional deficiencies began affecting Zhang's strength and endurance as his accelerated metabolism consumed energy faster than he could replace through available food supplies. Emergency rations provided minimal calories for the extreme physical demands of carrying heavy loads across mountain terrain for extended periods. Medical problems accumulated as blisters on his feet became infected, creating painful walking conditions that affected his gait and balance. Shoulder injuries from backpack pressure limited his range of motion and created constant pain that threatened to interfere with precise load handling required for explosive safety. Zhang's mental state remained focused on mission completion despite physical deterioration that would normally require immediate medical evacuation and extended recovery time. His determination was driven by constant awareness that 3,000 innocent lives depended on his ability to overcome every obstacle and complete explosive removal before the 72-hour detonation deadline. Hallucinations began occurring during Zhang's sixth load transport as extreme exhaustion and stress created perceptual distortions that made navigation and safety assessment more difficult. Zhang occasionally saw family members who weren't present, heard voices that didn't exist, and experienced temporary confusion about his location and mission objectives. Zhang's seventh load transport revealed that his physical capabilities had deteriorated beyond safe operational levels for continued explosive handling. His hands were no longer steady enough for reliable load securing, his balance was compromised by muscle fatigue and exhaustion, and his judgment was potentially impaired by accumulated stress and sleep deprivation. Medical assessment suggested that continuing the mission would likely result in accidental detonation caused by physical failure rather than external hazards. Zhang's body had reached its absolute limits, and pushing beyond those limits could result in exactly the outcome he was trying to prevent: explosive detonation that would kill innocent civilians. Zhang faced the agonizing decision between accepting partial mission completion that would reduce but not eliminate the threat to Garib village, or continuing operations despite physical incapability that could cause the disaster he was trying to prevent through his own physical failure and loss of control. However, abandoning the mission after 7 successful loads would still leave 150 kilograms of unstable explosives that would detonate within the danger zone, potentially killing hundreds of civilians even if the full catastrophe was prevented. Partial success meant partial failure, and partial failure meant innocent people would die. Zhang made the decision that defined his character and demonstrated the ultimate commitment to civilian protection. Despite his physical limitations and the enormous risk of continued operations, he would complete all 10 loads because anything less than complete success meant accepting preventable deaths. The psychological impact of this decision was enormous. Zhang understood that he was essentially committing to probable death in order to provide complete protection for people he had never met but who deserved someone willing to sacrifice everything for their safety. Zhang's eighth load transport occurred in a mental state that transcended normal human consciousness as extreme exhaustion, accumulated stress, and physical damage created an altered state of awareness that focused entirely on mission completion. His body operated on automatic responses developed through years of training while his conscious mind maintained singular focus on protecting innocent lives. The mountain terrain had become familiar through repetition, allowing Zhang to navigate optimal routes through muscle memory and instinctive reactions that didn't require conscious decision-making processes that had been compromised by accumulated fatigue and stress. Zhang's ninth load represented the closest approach to mission failure as physical capabilities approached complete collapse. His legs gave out twice during the transport, nearly resulting in falls that could have triggered explosive detonation and eliminated any chance of completing the mission. However, Zhang recovered each time through determination that exceeded normal human responses to physical limitation. Enemy activity increased during Zhang's final loads as hostile forces apparently recognized that American military operations were occurring in their area of influence. Several patrols passed close to Zhang's transportation route, requiring careful concealment and movement timing that consumed additional energy and time from his rapidly depleting reserves. Weather conditions deteriorated during the final phase of Zhang's mission as temperature fluctuations, increased wind, and potential precipitation created environmental hazards that threatened explosive stability and transportation safety. Zhang adapted his procedures continuously while maintaining forward progress toward mission completion. Zhang's 10th and final load transport pushed him beyond every physical and mental limit he had ever experienced or imagined possible for human endurance. His body was essentially operating on willpower alone as muscle function, cardiovascular capability, and neurological responses had been compromised by extreme stress and exhaustion. The final 30-mile journey required Zhang to stop every 100 meters to rest muscles that were no longer capable of sustained load-bearing, creating a transportation process that consumed 12 hours for movement that should have taken 6 hours under normal conditions. However, mission completion was more important than efficiency when innocent lives depended on successful explosive removal. Zhang reached the disposal area with his final load as the 69th hour of his 72-hour deadline approached, providing minimal margin for error but sufficient time to complete safe disposal procedures that would eliminate all threats to civilian populations. The relief of mission completion was overwhelming as Zhang realized that 3,000 innocent lives had been saved through his refusal to accept acceptable losses. The disposal procedures required careful placement of all explosive materials in a configuration that would ensure complete destruction during controlled detonation while minimizing environmental impact and eliminating any possibility of incomplete disposal that could create future hazards. Zhang triggered the controlled detonation from a safe distance, watching as months of dangerous explosive materials were eliminated in a spectacular display that represented the successful conclusion of an impossible mission accomplished through individual determination that had exceeded every limit of human capability. Military search and rescue teams located Zhang 6 hours after the controlled detonation, finding him collapsed from exhaustion but conscious and able to communicate. His condition required immediate medical evacuation for treatment of dehydration, muscle damage, infected wounds, and cardiovascular stress that had pushed his body beyond sustainable operational limits. The medical assessment revealed the full scope of physical damage Zhang had sustained during his mission: severe dehydration requiring intravenous fluid replacement, muscle strains throughout his back and legs that would require weeks of recovery, infected cuts and blisters that needed antibiotic treatment, and cardiovascular stress that indicated his heart had been operating beyond safe parameters for extended periods. Psychological evaluation documented combat stress reactions, exhaustion-induced hallucinations, and decision-making impairment that had developed during the final stages of his mission. However, mental health professionals noted that Zhang's psychological state remained fundamentally stable despite extreme stress, suggesting exceptional mental resilience and character strength. Zhang's mission report documented every aspect of his explosive transportation procedures, providing valuable information for future emergency operations while highlighting individual capabilities that exceeded normal military expectations for soldier performance under extreme circumstances. Zhang received the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration, recognizing his extraordinary courage and selfless service that had saved 3,000 innocent lives through individual sacrifice that exceeded normal human expectations for heroic behavior. The citation emphasized his willingness to risk certain death to protect civilians and his refusal to accept tactical solutions that would harm innocent people. The village of Garib established an annual celebration honoring Zhang's sacrifice and American military commitment to civilian protection. Children who had been saved by Zhang's mission grew up hearing the story of the soldier who carried death on his back to ensure their survival and future prosperity. Military explosive handling procedures were modified based on Zhang's innovations and techniques, improving safety protocols while providing alternative options for emergency situations where conventional approaches might prove inadequate for protecting civilian populations. Zhang's story became mandatory study material in military academies and explosive ordnance disposal schools, demonstrating that individual courage and determination could overcome circumstances that appeared impossible according to conventional military assessment. The psychological impact of Zhang's mission extended far beyond immediate tactical success, inspiring other soldiers to consider civilian welfare during military operations and reinforcing American values that prioritized innocent life protection over tactical convenience or operational efficiency. Years later, Zhang continued serving in explosive ordnance disposal roles while training other soldiers in techniques and decision-making processes that could save lives during similar crisis situations. His expertise became invaluable for developing emergency procedures that would enable future success when conventional approaches proved inadequate. Zhang understood that his mission had demonstrated the practical meaning of military service, protecting innocent people through individual sacrifice that exceeded personal safety considerations. His successful transportation of 500 kilograms of unstable explosives had prevented a tragedy that would have devastated thousands of families and communities throughout the region, and that's Corporal Zhang's ammunition courier story, the soldier who carried death on his back to save 3,000 innocent lives. Here at Last Signal Stories, we honor every act of courage that protects the innocent. If this story of sacrifice, determination, and civilian protection moved you, hit subscribe for more military stories. Drop a comment below, would you have made the same choice as Zhang? Until next time, stay tuned for the signal.